I just finished up yesterday with a one-to-one client, a male client actually, and he was adult diagnosed, so kind of falls into this category. And he asked me this question at the end of the coaching session I've never had a client ask. And he basically said, like, what have you noticed in me in terms of shifts or changes? Like, I'm curious from your lens, like what you've noticed. Cause of course I was asking him to do some of that reflection because it was at the end of our coaching session. And we literally talked about this, that what I noticed is when we first started working together, because he had sort of, and he acknowledged this, had refused to do some of this work around grief and anger and acceptance, that he was almost stuck. Like he was unable to really move toward action and like really start to implement anything because he was wrestling with, this just cannot be, right? Like this just cannot be my reality. And also like the finality of, I'm going to have to do this forever. And I'm a dad to like young kids. And like, how is this going to be my forever? But because he sort of wanted to bypass some of that and just wanted to like get to like, let's get to work. Like, I just want to work on action steps. I just want to move this forward. But he actually wasn't, like, he wasn't making progress. And it's because he wasn't willing to sort of sit with some of those feelings. And so, to your point about like not rushing through that, I think is so important because it will keep you from actually making real progress if you don't address those feelings.
Yeah. And figuring out like where that resistance is coming from. Like, I'm not doing certain things. Why am I not doing them?
Yeah.
Where is this coming from? Oh, because I'm in denial that this is happening. Well, of course you're not going to be doing the things that you think you should be doing because you haven't accepted as part of your reality yet.
Yeah. The other thing I thought about when I read this question was around the term comparative suffering. Is that a term that you've heard people talk about? Yeah. So it's like that idea of, I think sometimes when you get a diagnosis like this, I know from a parent perspective, there was a part of me that felt this way when my son was diagnosed, which is, well, at least it's not blank, or almost sort of like downplaying or looking to other conditions or diagnoses and sort of, you're feeling those real feelings of grief or anger or loss or whatever it is, but you're sort of like, well, I need to be grateful that it's not something that's worse than this or something, you know what I mean? You're sort of comparing your own suffering to other people. And I always feel like being mindful that you're not doing that you're not comparing your experience to somebody else's or trying to minimize your own experience in light of maybe what somebody else is going through, I think is important as well.
Yeah, Abby, this is like something that I struggled with personally. And I like hear my husband's voice in my head for many years saying like, other people have hard lives, but that doesn't mean your life isn't hard too, or this isn't hard for you. Both can be true at the same time, which has been something huge that I've used for myself and I've talked to clients about. Like, you can be stuck in this hard spot right now and you can continue to get better. Like two things can both be true at the same time. And same thing, it's like both things are hard, doesn't minimize your pain. And I think like to go along with the mental health discussion in type 1, I think that's where sometimes like the perfectionism comes into play of like, other people have it way harder than I do. I should act like everything's fine. So not even perfectionism, but like the acting like everything's fine when it's not. Hiding. There's shame around it. There's guilt. Around like, other people have it harder than I do. I could have this, I could have that. This could be going on. And so I'm just going to act like everything's fine and pretend like it's okay. And be really hard on myself internally and not tell anyone that I'm struggling. When I walk around, you can't tell. You can't, unless my device is showing, might not know I have type 1. So like, could be worse, but that doesn't mean it's not hard. And opening up to people is so important to share. Like, this is hard. And being vulnerable is, can be really hard to do. And so such an important part of the process.
Yeah. And what I've heard a lot on enrollment calls is this perspective of like, this all feels so heavy and so much, but if I open up and share it with other people, like, they're not going to understand it. So then I have this temptation to just keep it sort of bottled up. Like, it is hard and I am struggling, but like some of these messier emotions, that they might be feeling, it's like, they don't want to burden their partner or their family or whatever. And so they're keeping a lot of that to themselves. And again, ultimately that doesn't serve them for the long run, right? It does like isolate you when you do that. So I think the biggest thing, yeah, is like having those conversations, being honest about what you're feeling. I love what you said. I feel like, do you know the parenting coach, Dr. Becky? Have you ever heard
No.
of her? Oh, well,
Oh, wait, yes, I do. I
she's
do.
awesome.
I do. Yes.
Yeah, but she talks about like the two things can be true concept is like life changing for so many different things. And I think you're exactly right. Leaning into that truth can help if you're struggling with the grief process, but just getting the support you need. I will also acknowledge that for the client that I was referencing, um, about halfway through our sessions, he did seek a therapist and acknowledge that like
Mhm.
he needed to do some of that deeper work and how vital that was to actually like getting him some momentum going around his diabetes management because he had done some of that more deeper emotional work.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes people don't, it doesn't come out until we start talking about diabetes, right?
Yeah.
Because this may have been like the first time that we've talked about that those feelings have come up for someone. And I know like in the DCB, the group coaching program, we talk about mindset stuff a lot, especially towards the second half of the program. And it's the first time sometimes people have really have taken the time to sit with how
Mm,
they're feeling. We have a client who, we have a wins channel that
yeah.
everyone posts their wins, big and small. It could be I pre-bolus, it could be my time in range went up, whatever it is. I came to the call, whatever it is. And it was so wonderful. She posted yesterday, I think, that after our call on Tuesday, it was the first time that she let herself feel sad
Mm, yeah.
and how powerful that was for her because when she was diagnosed, she was in with like the doctor's office or something, and there was someone else who had type 1, and looking at him, you wouldn't be able to tell, and he looked normal. So I should act like I'm normal.
Yeah.
And she finally is like, I can feel sad, and this is part of my healing
Yeah.
process. And then, like, a couple other people commented, like, oh my gosh, me too, me too.
Yeah.
All of these things that you don't know come up until you take the time to pause,
Yeah.
feel it, acknowledge it, and know that it's such an important part of, like I said, again, that process of
Yeah.
healing.
Yeah, I think this is also just a big picture reminder of how like you cannot compartmentalize this as much as you try, right? It's like
Yeah.
you can pretend like it's in its own little box and category, but the reality is like it is so woven and integrated. It's like eventually like that has to be addressed, right? And like giving yourself permission to feel those feelings, even if you rush past them in the beginning. I've seen that with other parents who just like sort of jump over. It's like, oh, well, they're doing great. They're back to playing sports. Everything's fine. It's like they've not allowed themselves any space in there to grieve the loss of what was.
Yeah.
And I think that, yeah, making a space for that is so important.